Imagine waking up one morning and realizing your country survived the night not because it became stronger, but because it borrowed more time. Not money. Time. This is the story of a single day when America stood at the edge, looked down into economic collapse, and made a choice that still controls every paycheck, every tax bill, and every future crisis. This is not a story about numbers. It's about fear, power, and a decision that quietly reshaped the world. In moments like this, history doesn't feel dramatic. There are no explosions, no crowds in the streets, just closed-door meetings, tired faces, and one sentence that changes everything. If you've ever wondered how the richest country on earth can be drowning in debt yet still survive, this is where it starts. Before we go deeper, if you're interested in how big systems fail quietly instead of all at once, like this video and subscribe to Silent Collapse. It helps this channel grow and tells the algorithm you want more stories like this. Now, let's continue. The day America chose debt over collapse didn't feel historic at the time. The stock market didn't instantly crash. Grocery stores stayed open. Gas stations kept running. Gas. But behind the scenes, the system was locked in a standoff with itself. The government was spending more than it earned again. That part wasn't new. What was new was the scale, the speed, and the fear of what would happen if borrowing stopped. America runs on promises: social security checks, military salaries, interest payments, healthcare funding, and contracts with companies around the world. Every one of these promises depends on cash flow. When tax revenue isn't enough, borrowing fills the gap. For decades, this worked because the world trusted America more than any other borrower. U.S. debt wasn't just debt, it was considered the safest asset on Earth. But safety is a fragile idea. It exists only as long as people believe in it. On that critical day, lawmakers faced a brutal choice: stop borrowing and trigger immediate consequences, or raise the debt ceiling and push the problem forward. Stopping meant missed payments. Missed payments meant panic. Panic meant markets freezing, banks pulling back, businesses laying off workers, and retirement accounts shrinking overnight. Collapse wouldn't arrive slowly. It would arrive fast. So the decision was framed as responsible versus reckless. But in reality, it was survival versus uncertainty. Debt felt familiar. Collapse did not. Behind closed doors, the conversation wasn't about whether debt was dangerous. Everyone already knew it was. The real question was whether the system could survive one more delay. One more increase. One more promise that future growth would fix everything. Debt became the painkiller. Not a cure, but relief strong enough to get through the night. When America chose debt, it sent a signal to the world. It said the government would always pay no matter what. It told markets that U.S. bonds were still sacred, and for a while that worked. Investors kept buying. Interest rates stayed manageable. The dollar remained powerful, but every painkiller has side effects. Borrowing doesn't erase problems. It rearranges them. Instead of a sudden collapse, you get a slow leak. Inflation creeps in. Asset prices rise faster than wages. Housing becomes unaffordable. Young generations carry burdens they never agreed to. And here's the part most people miss. Choosing debt didn't protect everyone equally. It protected institutions first. Banks, large corporations, and asset holders benefited from stability. Meanwhile, regular workers felt the pressure through higher costs and stagnant pay. The collapse was avoided, but the stress was redistributed. This is a pattern. Silent collapse has explored again and again. Systems rarely fail in one dramatic moment. They fail by shifting damage away from those with power and toward those without it. Every time the debt ceiling debate returned, the same drama played out. Warnings, deadlines, emergency meetings. And then, at the last moment, another increase, another agreement, another reminder that collapse was unacceptable. But debt was negotiable. Over time, something changed in how people saw money. Trillions became normal, numbers so large they lost meaning. When everything is big, nothing feels urgent. This psychological shift may be the most dangerous consequence of all. Because debt isn't just financial, it's moral. It represents future labor, future taxes, future sacrifices, and yet the people making the decisions won't be the ones paying the full price. The day America chose debt over collapse, it also chose to delay accountability. Politicians avoided blame, markets avoided panic, voters avoided immediate pain. Everyone won in the short term. But the bill didn't disappear. It grew quietly, compounding in the background. You can see the echoes today. Every crisis now expects government intervention. Every downturn assumes stimulus. Every problem is met with more borrowing. The idea of living within limits feels outdated, even dangerous, and maybe that's the real collapse, not when the system breaks, but when it forgets how to stop. Supporters of the decision argue there was no alternative. They might be right. A sudden stop could have caused global chaos, millions of jobs at risk, retirement savings wiped out. In that moment, debt looked like the least bad option, but least bad doesn't mean harmless. Once you choose debt to avoid collapse, you teach the system that collapse will always be avoided. Risk-taking increases, discipline weakens, dependency grows. The world watches America closely. When the U.S. borrows without restraint, other countries follow. When America normalizes debt, it reshapes global finance. The ripple effects reach far beyond Washington. What started as a domestic decision became a global precedent. And here's the uncomfortable truth. There may never be a single day of collapse. No dramatic ending, just slower growth, rising inequality, and the constant sense that things feel harder than they should. That's how silent collapses work. They don't announce themselves, they blend into daily life. The day America chose debt over collapse wasn't heroic or evil. It was human, fearful, pragmatic, short-term focused, and that's why it matters so much, because the next time the choice appears, and it will, the answer will feel obvious again. If you've watched this far, you already understand something most people don't. Big systems survive not by fixing problems, but by postponing them, and the longer they're postponed, the harder they become to face. I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think America had any real alternative that day? Or was debt the only possible choice? Leave a comment, and share this video with someone who thinks collapse only happens overnight. Conversations like this are how awareness spreads. This is silent collapse, where we don't just talk about when systems fall, but how they quietly change long before they do. And yet, what most people never see is what happens after that fateful decision. Because the real story isn't about numbers on a screen. It's about trust. When America chose debt over collapse, it didn't just borrow money. It borrowed credibility. And that credibility is like invisible fuel. You only notice it when it's running low. But what if I told you that fuel has been leaking silently, drop by drop, ever since? Think about this. Every time politicians stood on TV and said, "We solved it," they didn't fix the problem. They just kicked it down the road again. And because of that, something strange began to happen. Ordinary people started assuming everything will be okay, even when the signs screamed otherwise. That's how collapse becomes silent. Not with a bang, but with a shrug. Here's the twist most news channels won't tell you. The decision to choose debt didn't just delay disaster. It changed how Americans think about money forever. We began treating borrowing like breathing. When you borrow air, you don't think about the cost. When you borrow trillions, you stop thinking about the cost either. That's where things get dangerous. But let me ask you something. If debt becomes a habit, what happens when the world stops believing in your ability to pay back? What happens when trust becomes the very thing that's worth more than gold, and suddenly it's gone? Before we go further, hit that like button if this topic feels urgent, because most people still don't realize how close collapse really was, and how close it could be again. Hit subscribe to Silent Collapse so you never miss an update on how systems silently fail before we even notice. Let's break it down. After that decision was made, Wall Street smiled. Banks cheered. Investors felt safe. But the everyday person? They didn't feel safer. They felt pressured. Rising rents, higher food costs, fewer opportunities. They felt something was off, even if they couldn't put a name to it. And that feeling matters, because emotions drive behavior. And when people start feeling insecure, they stop spending, they stop investing, they stop believing in the future. And that, ironically, makes the economy weaker. even while the debt gets bigger. Now, imagine this, a world where every outstanding dollar of debt depends not on productivity, but on belief. What keeps the dollar strong isn't gold, not even factories. It's confidence, confidence that the US will always be able to pay. But what if confidence is the very thing that can collapse without warning? Right now, experts are debating whether this invisible collapse has already begun, not in markets, but in the public's trust. Once that collapses, everything else follows it like dominoes. Have you ever noticed how every recession prediction feels more urgent than the last? That's not coincidence. When a system borrows before fixing underlying problems, you don't solve the issue. You amplify it. Debt fuels spending, not solutions, and here's something that will blow your mind. Some economists think that the decision to choose debt didn't just affect government finances, it altered corporate behavior too. Companies began borrowing more, paying executives more, and investing less in workers. That's how inequality grows. Not with riots, but with spreadsheets. Now this is where it gets really interesting. You may think collapse means dramatic events like stock crashes or social unrest. But silent collapse works differently. It seeps into daily life. It changes expectations. It makes you believe that temporary solutions are permanent realities. And that's how most systems fail. Slowly, quietly, without alarms. Imagine a car speeding toward a cliff, but instead of brakes, the driver just presses the gas harder and hopes the road never ends. That's the economy after that decision. More borrowing, more promises, more avoidance. By now, I know you're thinking several steps ahead. And that's good. Because surviving and thriving in this new reality isn't about fearing collapse. It's about understanding it. So let me ask you. Do you think America's choice was a lifeline or a time bomb? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every comment and I want to know what you think. And before you go, take a second to share this video with someone who still believes debt is harmless. The truth spreads fast when people start paying attention. This is silent collapse, where the loudest events aren't the biggest and the quietest choices matter most.